You ever get to that point where you're doing everything right in the gym? Like you're training 6 days a week, you're hitting your macros, you're tracking every meal, but somehow something just feels a bit off. You feel off. Like you're not tired physically, but mentally you're just drained. You see, that was me for years. I thought the harder I pushed, the stronger I'd get. And, technically, yeah, I got stronger, but I was also the weakest that I've ever been. Not in my body, but in my head. Because if I missed a workout, my whole day was ruined. And if I went out to a nice dinner and the food wasn't clean, I'd I'd spiral. I convinced myself that that's what discipline looked like. But bro, it wasn't discipline. It was control. It was anxiety just wearing a fitness mask. You see, it took me a while to realize that I'd built my own cage. And then I'd call it the gym. And there's a point where discipline turns into dependence. You know that feeling when everything in your day just depends on whether you trained or not? That's when you know you've gone too far. I used to skip out on hanging out with friends because it wasn't on the plan or part of the plan. I turned down dinners, turned down experiences. For what? To just keep a streak alive? I told myself, this is what separates me from the average guy. But that's not true. What separates you isn't how many sessions you can string together. It's how balanced you can stay when life gets messy. Most guys say they want to be disciplined, but what they really want is peace. They just think the gym is where they'll find it. I remember being in the best shape of my life on paper. I was lean, the veins were popping, numbers up. And one day I walked up a flight of stairs and I could feel my heart racing. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't fit, I was just aesthetic. I looked like I could do anything, but inside I was cooked. I was fragile because I'd built strength around control, not capability. And real strength isn't about flexing in the mirror, it's about how much life you can handle after you leave the gym. When your identity just becomes your workout? This one took me years to admit. The gym had become my identity. I didn't know who I was without it. If I wasn't training, I felt lazy, I felt lost. If I rested, I felt like I was slipping. If someone else was making progress, I'd question myself. And that's when I realized, I wasn't chasing progress anymore. I was running from the silence. Because when you stop moving, you're just left with your thoughts. And sometimes that's the scariest place to be. But you can't build peace if you keep running from stillness. And you can't be strong if your confidence disappears the moment you skip leg day. But here's the shift that changed everything for me. It wasn't a new program, it wasn't a new diet. It was just finally understanding this. I don't train to prove anything to anyone anymore. I just train to stay ready for life, for purpose, for people, for my family, whatever it is. Life is always throwing some bullshit at you, right? So I stopped chasing exhaustion and I started chasing energy. I cut down my workouts. I started walking more. I took rest days seriously and I gave myself permission to leave the gym, with something left in the tank. It was okay. I was going to live another day. It was going to be all right, bro. And it's funny, the less I tried to control everything, the more consistent I became. The less obsessed I was, the stronger I felt. Not just in my lifts, but in how I showed up outside of the gym. Because the real test isn't whether you can train every day, it's whether you can stay calm when you can't. You see, real strength looks quiet. Look, the strongest men I know, they're calm. They don't need to post every PR or PB. They don't panic when life shifts their schedule. They just keep showing up, steady, ready to go. Strength isn't loud, it's grounded. It's that quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle your shit, you can handle things, you're standing on business without having to prove it every second of the day. Nobody in your life cares where you bench. I mean, yeah, like I'll go to the gym, see these guys pumping out fucking 4 or 5 plates. I'm like thinking, fuck, must be nice. But then again, it's like, okay, well, he walks funny. You know what I mean? People don't care. They're, deep down, people don't really care about this shit. They care whether you can hold it together when life gets heavy. They care if you've got energy left when you got home. That's real strength. So if this hit home, take a week, reset. I built the free 7-day masculine reset. It's in the description below. Click the link. It's the same structure that I use to get out of this cycle. No obsession, no guilt, no noise, just direction. Give it a go. Start it. Feel what it's like to just train for life again. Not for approval. Because at the end of the day, man, your worth isn't in your physique. It's in your peace. So you need to stop letting the gym own you. Train because you love your body, not because you're trying to fix it. You need to build something that lasts. So anyways, something I was thinking about lately, and I hope you guys found some value out of this. Give it a share with a couple of your mates, anyone who needs to hear this, anyone who you think is sort of in that similar mindset or hole at the moment. Send it to them. Give it a like, comment below. What you guys are feeling at the moment. I want to see what other topics we can talk about. So catch you guys in the next one.